Traders, how are you? With Marcello, we are on the road again traveling. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Elon Musk starts a bidding war for Twitter. We have a once-in-a-lifetime storm in North Dakota and Montana, which dropped like 30 inches of snow. And we also have the markets heading lower. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall for the week, most of the same concerns about what's going on with the global economy. We have the situation with the shutdowns in China. Remember, China is literally the maker of everything in the world. Literally, right? It's one of the three major manufacturing hubs in the world. Germany being another one, which has really negative news in that front as well. And then we also have a situation where people are concerned as well about the inflation. We're reaching decades and decades high of inflation, and also the monetary policy, meaning the decisions that the central banks around the world are taking, especially that in the US, being the preeminent global power in the world. Obviously, the economy is starting to stagnate. They're increasing rates, and inflation is exploding, which means stagflation, a stagnant economy and very high inflation, which is not bueno for anybody. Billionaire Elon Musk made a formal bid, said that he wanted to buy the entire company for $54.20 a share, about $43 billion or so, 38% premium. Twitter, instead of allowing everybody free speech, what they decided was to be able to go ahead and continue their censorship and do a poison pill. Let's call it the best way to say it is a poison pill. If you guys don't know what that is, because I know a lot of you guys are new that watch the videos, or newer to the markets, I should say. Basically, they try to thwart a takeover of the business by adopting some measures that won't be lucrative for the people that are trying to take over the company. And in this situation, what they said is basically anybody who buys more than 50% of the company without the board's approval, what they will do is allow other shareholders to buy their stock at a discount, therefore diluting the shares. So somebody tries to buy it really expensive or at the market price, for example, and then they'll sell a bunch of shares at a cheap price to be able to lower the amount that that person owns, so that person can't control the actual company. Overall for the week, we have the Dow and the S&P 500, NASDAQ as well, all negative. The markets in Canada were negative as well. Latin American markets mostly negative as well. Africa and the Middle East, Egypt had a big move to the downside, 3.95% negative, most negative of all in the Middle East and Africa. And then in the far east, most markets, it was mixed, but more negative than positive at about 1-2% or so. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news. Peter Thiel, which is a Bitcoin activist, billionaire, and maybe the next purchaser of Twitter with Elon Musk. He's saying that he's calling Warren Buffett a sociopath grandpa from Omaha. And he also said he's Bitcoin's enemy number one. If you guys remember, Warren Buffett called Bitcoin rat poison. And he said that he would never invest in it. There's also, there seems to be two extremes when it comes to Bitcoin. People say it's the future, and then you have other people like Warren Buffett saying that it's rat poison. He also said that Warren Buffett is the number one enemy to Bitcoin. If you guys remember, Warren Buffett, I believe about 2 weeks ago, I let you guys know that they bought a bank called Nubank in Brazil, which is known for allowing people to purchase crypto. So doesn't buy crypto directly, but he'll buy banks that offer the service. And NFT in the bubble that's popping, the first NFT of Jack Dorsey's tweet, which sold for $2.9 million in 2021. The owner wanted to resell the NFT, which is basically just, a screenshot of somebody's tweet, essentially, right? It's, technically that's what it is. He wanted to resell it for $48 million. Was going to give half of the proceeds to charity, and he only got an offer for $280. So if you guys remember last week as well, the volumes on OpenSea, which is a company, or let's call it a marketplace where you buy and sell the NFTs, has collapsed as well, 70% down from before. So it doesn't mean, this is what I always tell you guys, and even the markets in general, you can make money with anything, right? Whether it's NFTs or Forex or stocks or whatever. but just make sure that you learn properly, because obviously if you don't, you can obviously make a lot of money with something, but you can also not make a lot of money and lose money with these things as well. And that's what unfortunately a lot of people are seeing now with the NFTs, due to the fact that a lot of them are collapsing. Amazon CEO on Thursday, Andy Jassy, said that the company is not close to adding crypto as a payment option for its retail business. And the U.S. Treasury Department said, if you guys remember, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, there was 23rd of March, that should be 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a $615 million hack in the popular game of Axie Infinity, which I have a lot of teams that are producing there as well. They said that North Korea was behind the actual hack of the $615 million in Axie. Luckily, they didn't steal anything from me, but as I always tell you guys, be careful. Cryptos is one of those markets where it's not regulated. There was an exchange in Canada, not in a third world country, that just collapsed, and they took hundreds of millions of dollars from users. So just make sure you go where it's a little bit safer to go, because the market is still not regulated for the most part. Bitcoin lower this week, 4.85% negative. It's over 12% down for the week. It closed at just under 42,500. And some analysts are talking about how we have a lot more choppy behavior to be expected in regards to Bitcoin. Commodities, global food prices have hit an all-time high according to the UN Food and Agricultural Organization Cost of Food Index. It's gone up in just 1 month, 12.6%. In Chile, which just voted for the communists, the only first world country in the in all of Latin America, they've decided to remove the Senate from Congress, from the government, to be able to implement some other kind of system. And this is what happened in Venezuela, for example, where they just decided to change the government. What's been working for them all this time, they're the only first world country in Latin America. Unfortunately, it's another country that's gone down the wayside. Other than that, they're having a huge drought. The city of Santiago, for the first time in the 491-year history of the city, they're going to start rationing water. So it's not only California or Texas or many other parts of the world that are having shortages in water. They have a 4-step plan where now, if it gets really, really bad, 1.7 million people a day might go out without water for 24 hours. India is also set to have rolling blackouts due to the fact that they've had a significant change in the climate, or let's call it an earlier summer, where it's getting a lot hotter a lot sooner, which means that if it stays the way it is, it's going to be a lot harder for a lot longer as well. They're also having a situation where they're not able to have enough carbon to be able to, enough coal to be able, and just in case you were wondering, that's how you say coal in Spanish, carbón. Hablar bonito español. So they're not able to have as much coal in their reserves with the electric plants that use coal to be able to go ahead and fire them up. They only have, I have it written here, give me 1 second to find it. They only have 9 days worth of consumption, where in 2019 they had 18 days. In 2021 they had 12 days. So it's getting harder and harder to be able to find the coal to be able to fire up the power plants. Colombia could produce up to 2 million barrels per day of oil, according to the demand for the United States, as everyone is trying to ban the Russian oil. If you guys remember, about 3% of the United States oil, we still pay Russia to be able to get their oil, obviously because we shut down production and things like the Keystone Pipeline. And so instead of paying Canada, for example, for the oil that they have, we decide to give it to terrorists and crazy people like Putin. That's why I told you guys before that the sanctions really, they're not doing anything, because at the end of the day, we're still giving money to Putin for oil, and we're giving them the money to literally launch the war. Tesla has acquired a Nevada-based lithium mining company called Lithium Corporation. If you guys remember, we talked about that last week, where they were talking about going into the mining directly to the huge surge in the price of lithium. Lithium is a material, the main material that goes into the batteries for the EVs, the electric vehicles. U.S. lumber prices have fallen to levels that haven't been as high for the last 4 months due to the soaring inflation. Due to the inflation and also the rising costs of absolutely everything, in addition to the lumber, which exploded during the pandemic, a lot of people now are foregoing a lot of do-it-yourself renovations in their homes. So the demand is going down quite a bit. And obviously if the demand goes down, the supply goes up. There's a lot more lumber on the market, which makes it a lot cheaper to be able to buy. OPEC is telling the EU that it is nearly impossible to replace the Russian oil cut off by the sanctions or boycotts. Most people don't know that the United States was producing a lot more before, which would cover the Russian the production. They're also saying that due to the fact that Russia accounts for about 10% of global oil production, they're not able to come up with the difference, which obviously for them, it's better if they have higher oil prices because they make more money, right? And one thing that isn't going up in cost is the like button there on YouTube. So go ahead and smash that like button if you guys would. And if you're listening on the podcast, just look up Marcelo Arambide, or if you pronounce it in Spanish like I do, Marcelo Arambide, there on YouTube, and you guys should pull it up if you guys want to see the video. I saw in some of the comments there on the podcast. If you guys want to see it on YouTube, to let you know how to do it. And then for others of you that want to listen to the podcast, just look up Day Trading Academy there on Spotify or wherever you look for your podcast, and you should be able to find it there. Biden on Friday is slightly reversing course for the promises that he made about the oil drilling and to try to quote unquote save the environment. He is reassessing plans to be able to drill for oil and gas on federal government lands. The move is, as I mentioned, a break of what he pledged and obviously angering the environmentalists. And oil for the week, both oil in the U.S. and Brent, which is the international, went up close to 9%. Oil in the U.S. closed out at $100.07, just under 107, whereas Brent went to almost 112. Gold prices are up this week. In addition to silver, gold went up by, 1.41%, where silver went up to 3.61%. Gold is at 1,975. Remember that in 2021, it hit a record high 2,070, where silver went up 3.61% to 2,577, and the record high for silver was in the 80s when it almost hit $50, almost. Financial and banking news. The producer price inflation, all of the new inflation numbers around the world are hitting record highs. 8.3% for the producer inflation in China. The CPI, however, which is the consumer price inflation in China, went up by only 1.5%, which basically means that a lot of the companies are assuming the cost increases rather than as passing that to the consumers. The U.S. index jumped 1.7%, so the dollar's now has its biggest gain for the last 4 months. This is obviously due to the Fed, the central bank of the United States, anticipating an increase in the interest rate. So if they increase the interest rates, what's going to happen is more demand for the dollar as people remove their money from risky assets, quote unquote, as the stock market, because it's a variable interest rate, right? Rather than investing in a bond, for example, or government debt, which is a fixed interest rate. Essentially, it's like getting guaranteed payment back from a government as long as it doesn't go bankrupt, compared to the stock market, which isn't a guaranteed return, which is why it's considered more risky. The US CPI, 8.5%, highest since the 1980s when it was at the 8% level. One of the things they don't tell you, however, is if we calculated the inflation at the same rate that we calculated it in 1980, because they changed it, it would be close to 20%. And both you and I know when we talked about, a few years ago where this wasn't going to be transitory, this is going to get worse, it's not going to get better. Hope you're preparing because the preppers were right. JP Morgan posted a 42% decline in profit from a year earlier. That has to do with bad losses. They took a $902 million hit from the bad losses, in addition to a few other hits from the Ukraine war. A lot of other central banks around the world are starting to increase their interest rates. New Zealand went up by 50 basis points to 1.5%. Bank of Korea, meaning South Korea, went up 25 points by 1.5% as well. And the Central Bank of China didn't go up. They actually left it the same, which surprised a lot of analysts. Political news, there are elections in France. The extreme right candidate Le Pen goes against the center left candidate in Macron. He absolutely won by a landslide in the last elections, but now a lot of people are saying that Le Pen challenges Macron quite well this time around. And if that happens, that would definitely change a lot of things in Europe due to the fact that for the most part, Germany and France run things ever since the UK left the European Union. So if France, for example, goes extreme right compared to most of the rest of Europe, which is more center, then obviously that could definitely change a lot of things there in Europe. Biden's approval rating in other political news went to a new low of 38%, while 53% of those polled disapprove of his work so far. And in Taiwan, remember what I always told you guys, always pay attention what people do, don't pay attention to what they say. Remember last week, Europe was starting to stock up on emergency supplies for example, nuclear war and other things. Taiwan now is giving their citizens a survival handbook in case of a Chinese invasion, which includes blackouts, large fires, building collapses, and devastating weather. And this is what happens, for example, when a country like Russia invades Ukraine, and nobody does anything about it, essentially. Remember in 2014, Russia invaded Crimea and just took it during the Obama presidency, and now they just taken over Ukraine. Whether you want to pay attention or listen if they're winning or losing, I don't get into kind of those political things because you kind of hear things on both sides, but they're worried, and I honestly think that Taiwan is going to be invaded by China by the end of Biden's first term. In economic news, UK economy slowed more sharply in February, only 0.8% growth. Russia's economy is set to contract 10% in 2022. It's the biggest fall in the size of the economy in Russia since the fall of the USSR. For many that don't know, they used to be a much bigger country. It was called the I don't know what the SNS stand for Russia, if you guys want to help me that, but essentially it was the Federation. Now it's the Federation of Russia. Before it was the USSR. And a country like Ukraine, the territory of Ukraine used to be part of the previous country, which is part of the reason, for example, Putin's going after it now. According to Jamie Dimon, the CEO, the biggest U.S. bank by assets, they're saying that the central bank in the United States might tip the U.S. into a recession due to the actions that they're taking now. Since it's still flush with cash, a lot of people and businesses and also people are going to keep spending money in the second and third quarter. So he's predicting that we're still going to continue to grow ever so slightly, but we're most likely going to get into a recession by the fourth quarter. And then Singapore's central bank maintained their expectation to expand the economy quite a bit. They grew 7.6% in 2021 after the huge slowdown from the pandemic. And then it looks like Ukraine's economy is going to go down by 30 or 50% due to the fact that there's a situation where there's a little bit of a war going on, and obviously that's causing havoc all over the place. Corporate news, Microsoft shares are going down. They went down by 3.9% on Monday due to the fact that the shipment of PCs have gone down by quite a bit in quarter one. So if there's less computer sales, that means that less people are going to buy the Microsoft Office trash that you can now get for free online. And German potash and salt miner called K&S Company, which produces about 11% of the world's potash. Remember that there's certain different types of fertilizer in the world, and we talked about the situation with the food shortages and the fertilizer shortages that come from the war in Ukraine due to the fact that Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus produce more than a third of the fertilizer in the world. Potash is one of the materials of one type of the main fertilizer that we use for food. So this company now is saying that they're going to make a huge amount of money, $2.36 billion, and the amount of the increase in the fertilizer prices is going up higher than a lot of the input costs in addition to the energy and logistics costs. So you can expect costs to continue to go up, especially for food, due to the fact that if a company that makes or mines the material that is used in fertilizer is saying that their prices are going up by quite a bit, that means that you and I, which is, a few steps down the line from the fertilizer chain, obviously is going to go up quite a bit as well. Shopify Inc. on Monday announced a 10-for-1 split for their Class A and Class B stock. They're joining a lot of other firms that are splitting their shares to try to entice investors to buy and make it a lot more attractive. Overall for the year, they are right. The stock is at $617.38. But it has lost over 55% of value, that stock from Spotify so far this year. Nokia, in addition to the Swedish company Ericsson, have stated Monday that they're going to go ahead and pull out of Russia due to the situation in Ukraine. The World Trade Organization in trade news is also cutting the global growth forecast from 4.7% to 3%, mainly due to the disruption from the Ukraine war. So now everybody's going to be blaming the Ukraine war for everything. And he also stated that the poorer countries are at greater risk for food shortages. And in technology, the researchers at UC Berkeley, this is actually pretty cool, they've developed a new way to 3D print glass microstructures, which is going to half the cost or drop the cost quite a bit of glass, which is actually pretty interesting. They can literally make houses now at 1/10 of the cost with a lot of these big 3D computers. Professor Edward Adelson and his group at MIT have developed a human hand, it's like a glove. It's like a computerized hand, which now has the same sensitivity that can exceed that of the human hand. So the robots are going to take over very soon. And then in investment news, China's released their home prices data on Thursday, and they now have, for the 70 major cities, the sales have stalled for the second consecutive month in March, slowest growth rate since March 2015. And international events, the UK intelligence services is saying that Russia is readying for another large invasion of eastern Ukraine, while Finland and Sweden are stating that they're just weeks away from deciding if they want to join NATO or not, while a Security Council deputy of Russia is saying that if they do join NATO, they're going to become enemies of Russia. And they're obviously right on the border, if you guys didn't know. Unusual facts this week. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in addition to the Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, are set to get fines from the police from violating the coronavirus pandemic stay-at-home order. So not all politicians apparently do whatever they want and not get away with it. And in crazy storms, I haven't been talking about the natural disasters and things, even though they're happening quite a bit. But we're in the middle of April. Happy birthday, Marcello. And Montana and North Dakota had a huge once-in-a-century freak storm, which had over 30 inches of snow in the middle of what should be the springtime, because we're in April. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Sorry for the break in the sound if you guys are listening. Obviously, I'm traveling, so I'm not, I don't have my normal setup. But we'll see you next week. Prepare yourself, because the preppers are right.